If you're not an expert about your customers, that's the number one biggest blind spot, period.
Bryan, I'd love to learn more about your story, what you do today. Please share with our audience, our podcast. Our podcasts are people who, our audience, our demographic is people who are probably in their late 20s to mid 30s. They're people who are interested in entrepreneurship, in business. They listen to this because they want to learn new things. We bring people of all types. So I'd love to just spend today just to dig into your story and learn about your journey.
Well, I'm gonna take you kind of backwards in a way, because it's interesting. I was talking to my good friend Mitch Joel the other day. I'm just about to release a new book next month, and it's different than any of the other books that I've written in the past, because here I am, and in my low 50s, I've got a daughter who is just about to graduate, UT Austin, and headed off to a new city for her job after she graduates in June. My middle son, who is also my athlete, he's about to head to college to play sports, as a college athlete. And then I have a youngest one who's 13. And it was April this year, and my son was off for the day. And he goes to me, "Hey, Dad, can we go out and play catch?" And I'm like, "Give me a minute. I'm just sending off something to a client, and sure, we can go." And as I'm catching that first throw from him, I realize at that moment how very lucky I have been that I've been on this entrepreneurial journey for more than half my life. And unfortunately, the biggest part of the growth phase of that journey, they were too young to really remember, right? They didn't see, growing the agency and taking it public. They didn't see the early companies that that we've advised that now have become public. They just, it's not within their mind space, right? And as I'm thinking about it, and as I'm enjoying that moment of freedom that I have to be able to be there, and thinking about the handful of games I've missed in his baseball career. I mean, handful, okay? Or he was getting invited to play in the World Baseball Classic in September and October for Argentina. My parents were originally from Argentina. And the fact that I was going to be able to go there to work.
And this was your second son? Was this your middle child?
One. Yeah, my middle one. Yeah, he's a bit of a big boy. He's all of 6'5", 260 pounds. So what, 120 kilos?
Whoa, that's double my weight probably.
Yeah, he's just massive. And he ended up not going because crazy story with Major League Baseball. But anyway, as I sat there, I'm like, there's so many great stories that, they've never heard me tell. They haven't been around the entrepreneurs I've been, with in the last, 25 plus years that we've consulted to, that we've trained, that there's just so much. And so there was a story my brother and I always used to tell with between each other for the last, again, 20 plus years. And we've never told it publicly. And I knew that story and the character behind that story was going to be the basis for this book. And so I just completed The Rice and Beans Millionaire, the tale of an improbable entrepreneur. And it's all based on real characters, real stories, just written together kind of as a fictional story. It's 22,000 words. It reads in about an hour. And I wrote it because when I came in from playing catch with him, I realized there's one big flaw missing in the market, okay? I realized that if you were to recommend one book, and I went ahead and I asked all my friends who've been, entrepreneurs and consulting entrepreneurs for the last 20 plus years as well, I said, one book that you could recommend to a young aspiring entrepreneur of any age, whether they're 13 or whether they're 78, doesn't really matter. What's the one book that you give them that would cover all the first principles, so to speak, right? All the mindset, the thinking, the basic skills they need in order to be a successful entrepreneur. And they looked at me and they thought, and I heard some good books, Good to Great, E-Myth, The Lean Startup. all of them had these slight bends to it. All of them covered pieces of it, but it didn't cover how do you become an entrepreneur? How do you go from, having a job, which I was working as a social worker, studying for my master's in social work in graduate school, when my brother and I teamed up in our first business together. And this is going back to 1995. Being a social worker and looking at the social work salaries, I'm very glad he saved me, because I was just going to have, a job for the rest of my life. And of course, what job stands for, right? Just over broke. And I'm like, okay, he's led me on that path. And I definitely wanted to kind of make that shift at this point in my career to be able to help others on that journey. And I don't care whether you're doing a tech business or whether you're picking up, garbage from people's houses, like my friend Brian Scudamore from 1-800-GOT-JUNK. It doesn't matter, right? They're all entrepreneurs, and there are a lot of key lessons. And what I found, which is really interesting now that I've started putting this all together, is that the reason these first principles that I cover in the book are so critical is because they're the cornerstones of the blind spots that many entrepreneurs get as they grow their business. They usually come at it from one perspective or another. Many of them, don't have finance backgrounds. They don't think about balance sheets and cash flow and all that. Some of them don't come from a sales background. They've never sold anything. So they don't understand the principles of persuasion, right? And as you start going through all these principles, you realize, they've never built a community. They don't know what encompasses, that takes, and building behind, what people believe in. And so when you start looking at those blind spots, you realize, no wonder we've been helping companies for the last, 2+ decades improve their revenue, because we were able to help them identify those blind spots.
Interesting. And then is your book a combination of stories that you've gone throughout your business life, or are they sort of more life stories?
So it's written as a narrative. It's based in the basketball courts where I grew up, with some of the characters I met there. I'm not going to tell you too much about the Rice and Beans Millionaire, but I will tell you that back in the day, I modernized it. Back in the day, my dad actually met this Rice and Beans Millionaire. This is where my brother and I got the story from. There was this young immigrant. He was a Dominican kid who used to walk into the bank where my father was a vice president of at the time. And he literally came in with a duffel bag full of cash every week, in the tune of about $50,000 a week in the 1980s. And they couldn't believe what it was. Where's this guy getting all this money from, right? So they asked my dad, and this is before, obviously, 9/11, all that, but they still, it's the drug wars. And so my father, having been from Argentina, spoke Spanish, and being on the vice president, he agreed that he'd follow him for a week to see what the business was. And he watched him, and he watched how, what the business was, and he explained to him. And I won't give you the full story, but basically, it was the Chipotle before there was a Chipotle, and it was the Uber Eats before there was an Uber Eats. Okay, it was all about his network and relationships and how he found locations, and he was just cash. Biggest problem is he didn't become a client of the bank because he didn't necessarily report most of that cash to the IRS. They knew there was going to be a problem there, so that wasn't their thing. But my brother and I always said, man, why can't we come up with a business as simple as the Rice and Beans business, which is basically for $5, he would sell people a big plate of rice and beans and a little bit of protein, and then he'd give them a can of soda, $5 cash. That was it. That was the whole business. Understanding how he got there is part of the fun part that I'll leave for the book. But I think when you realize that he had such a simple business of just bringing not just satisfaction, but obviously delight to customers, because they were so happy to give him the money, because there wasn't a lot of options back then, right? And how he understood leveraging other people's time and other people's efforts and other people's money. He really was a brilliant entrepreneur, even though he, in the most basic. He wasn't super educated, which again, you don't need to be a great entrepreneur. But we figured it was a great way to take him, age him a little bit. He probably learned a few stories, been through, seeing companies like Amazon, Alibaba, Google, blah, 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 all these great companies. And then being able to kind of, share that wisdom with others. And so that's the premise of the book. But, like I've weaved in MrBeast's story, but he's intertwined into another character who's a friend of mine. But it's the same thing. Like all these things actually happened, but the principle that we learn about entrepreneurism from that story, it doesn't matter who the character is, as long as obviously it all fits within the narrative of the story.
Interesting. And was the agency, was that the simple business model that you guys were looking for, and was that it?
Well, when we first started our business, we were doing some consulting. We were building some of our own websites back in the early day. I built one of the first candy shops online, hand coded the whole affiliate marketing behind it, and built some basic testing functionality into it. Like I did everything way back then. And that's where we learned a lot about conversion optimization and SEO and stuff like that. And eventually we started, consulting to companies like, Puma and a couple of others. And we realized that, we could do more of an optimization agency. It was really kind of what we enjoyed. My brother came from a finance background. Again, I was a social worker, and I was always trying to understand, why do people do the things they do? And, going back to our very first book, Persuasive Online Copywriting, right, that we wrote in 2001, it was just about understanding how different personality types gather information, how they make decisions, what motivates them. And so we've used a lot of those principles over the years. And we realized that there was a traditional business model where, you first, you publish, you consult, and then you eventually can, speak, and then eventually you do some software. And we did exactly that. And then that's how we eventually took the agency public, as we built some of our own software, and we also acquired a technology, and we're able to use that to take it public back in the day. Of course, when the market crashed, but that's a whole different story. We had bad timing on that one.
That's crazy. Within the consulting space, what's your recommendation for consultants to acquire customers? Like, how did you guys acquire customers, and how did you guys get big accounts like Puma? That's amazing.
Well, that was back early. That was part of just having a network, right? Like it was the people we knew. But we built a reputation. We had gone out, and I recommend it to all my clients. I'm dealing with a guy now who's a young entrepreneur. He's a physical therapist. He was a baseball player before that, and he's building a online training model, right? So it's a virtual consulting model, right? He has some specialized training that he does now, focused especially on baseball players, but he'll go to other things. It's called Baseball Flows. And I told him, I said, the first thing you need to do is you start having to make a presence, right? You have to start building a name, start building the stories of your tribe. And it literally is about, getting the first customers on, getting the success stories, sharing those success stories, telling more success stories. And as you keep doing this consistently over years, you get hired by people like, Google and Edmunds and HP and GE. And so that's just what it is.
And are you still working on the agency and software, or have you exited that completely?
No, we left that one a long time ago. Now we do some consulting on the side. But we're also building out a data analytics platform for home services companies. When COVID hit, home services was a category that obviously grew a lot because people were spending more time in their home, right? So HVAC, plumbers, electricians, and we realized that those businesses were about to go through the same transformation that traditional retailers did, back when we first started on the web. They don't have web analysts looking at their data, and they're getting tons of data from their systems, from their booking systems and their leads and dispatch. And so how do we take all of that data that they're getting and turn them into a data-driven company? So instead of a $1 million, HVAC company, they can become an 8 million, then become an 80 million, 100 million and so on. And there are a few of those in the industry that have already started, but yeah, we're able to start working with some of the smaller ones based on them using a particular platform that we've decided to build on top of. And so we're in the process of just launching that one up as well.
Interesting. And when you talk about data, is it just like everything from emails from people putting in the emails on the website to like cookies on whoever visits the websites to just combining
part
everything?
of it. It's all the calls that come into the call center and how effective the call centers are. It's understanding the technicians who come into the house and, do they do upsells? So, not only they're cleaning out your air conditioner, but, do they sell you a new filter for the UV? There's all kinds of other things that are going on. Again, it's not, these are plumbers and electricians running these businesses. They're not hiring data analysts yet, but their business is pumped full of data and they need to make sense of it. And so, we're using, little machine learning, little AI algorithms, a couple of other things, and a lot of our experience just to help them really get a handle of that data. And, once you can manage it, then you can grow it.
So when you sort of saw this gap or problem initially, did you then reach out to like a small pool of people in the home industry and then everyone was like, yes, this is completely what I need, and that gave you the validation, hey, maybe we should build this out?
Yeah. We already had a few, bigger clients talking to us, and they were telling us about some of their needs, and we were consulting to them. Again, we take on, a couple of consulting clients every year, and that's about it at this point. But we realized that it was, a lot of our friends from the Wizard of Ads partners. Our mentor Roy Williams has a whole network of partners across the globe, including in Australia. My good friend Craig Arthur. A lot of them have worked in this industry, or in these multiple industries, right? Because this could be garage door openers, roofers. I mean, it's a wide category, and a lot of them have a lot of the similar problems. It's just understanding your people, processes, and tools. That's what it is. And if we can refine them based on the data, you can become more effective. And the more effective you can make every dollar, the more successful you're going to be. Because that's what happens, especially as we see in a recession, and like we saw in the last one as well. Those that optimized really well and make their dollars go farther, those are the ones that survive. I mean, we lived through the original .bomb days. I mean, we had one of our very first clients was a small online magazine retailer, and he was competing against, I think it was like magazines.com, I think it was actually, and they had gotten something like a $30 million, some crazy number of investment. They went out of business. Our friend just kept on going because he was able to optimize what it cost them to get a customer in on his e-commerce site, sell them more subscriptions, and keep the business going. And I think he was still in business, for years and years after that. Now he went into the agency world. By the way, he's doing SEO work. But it was funny because, you can have tons of cash, but if you don't know how to use it effectively, it means nothing.
And do you have a technical background where when you have this idea, or do you just are you just really good at hiring sort of developers?
No, we were very fortunate that early on, we had a partner of ours, John Cordovan-Tividar. We call him Q because it's a lot easier to spell than Cordovan-Tividar. He was one of the guys who very early on developed, some of the early frameworks on web development and stuff like that. And he helped influence our concept of persuasion architecture and the processes. And so we would do just a better job at laying out what it is that needed to be built because of the language you use and the processes we used to wireframe and to map out experiences. Same way we would do for clients. And so building software just became more effective.
Interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Like, for example, this software that you're building out to help sort of all these home related sort of companies, you have this idea, there's like a missing bridge on data and companies aren't able to get data on their salespeople that go out to these stores. So you have this idea of this software or this sort of thing that can somehow track everything. How do you then put that into words that a developer can then build? Well,
so we actually are doing a little backwards, right? Because again, it's the audience. if I was building just an analytics product, it would be very simple, because then you just give everybody a simple dashboard like a Google Analytics. But these plumbers and electricians are not going to tolerate those interfaces. So we had to, first of all, rethink how we deliver information, right? Insight to them. So that was the first step. So once we were able to do that, we said, okay, what are the key things they need to know? And so the most common one that we found was their call centers, because these businesses live and die by their call centers, okay? Lead comes in, how fast do you respond? Someone calls in, can I get them booked, right? And what would happen is they'd get calls, and the call center reps would put different dispositions for the calls, right? This was a lead, this was excused, this was not a lead. Well, there are a bunch of different ones that were built into the software. And the way the software that they use currently looks, it made them look like they had, like for example, one client, that he had like an 86% conversion rate to calls coming in. Then we went ahead and we actually analyzed all that data, because it didn't sound right. And it turned out he had like a 22% effective conversion rate, right? It's just that his call center agents were marking everything as, non-lead. These were non-leads, so they weren't important. And by doing that, they actually didn't realize the extent of the problem that they had. They were spending all this money to drive in, let's say, 100 calls, but they were only saying, well, only these 10 really are leads. The other 90 weren't. So, but we're converting those 10, so no problem. No, there's something going on with those 90. We needed to understand that. And then we needed to figure out, okay, so how do we present this true conversion rate versus the other one and not create conflict as well? And so part of that is also the experience of having consulted for a lot of years. And so, that was one of the first metrics. And we've gone into, I don't know, it's probably 60, 80 different of these businesses. It's almost always the same exact pattern, and it doesn't matter the size, big or small. And part of it's time, part of it's their training as well. But if you don't tag your data and it's not clean, you don't really know what's happening, right? And I think the biggest lesson for a lot of them ultimately is a lesson that we talked about in our book, like, Be Like Amazon, right? Right up there, which is our previous one. Jeff Bezos, right, CEO of Amazon, still expects, former CEO, he would have engineers spend time on the call center because if you're not listening in, you don't know the problems. We found the same issue when we were at Google, right? Engineers had different expectations of the knowledge base of their customers versus the actual customers. And so when, there's that knowledge gap, that perception gap of what our customers know and what we know, that's a blind spot. And that's been our passion, to try to help people understand those. And so same thing as a basic entrepreneur. If you don't understand your cash flow and your profit and loss statements, right? Your financial statements, you're going to have blind spots.
Now, as an entrepreneur, how did you get so broad and get to a point where you can cover all your blind spots? I think that's sort of the things I've learned from studying the Bill Gates, the Jeff Bezos. They're so broad. They know everything from accounting to technical knowledge to marketing to sales. And does it just come from an innate drive to learn everything and be better?
Well, it's definitely drive to learn and a little bit of gray. I mean, you definitely need years of experience. It's kind of, like the talent code, right? You need the 10,000 hours, even though that's been proven a set fallacy, but you need hours. And this is part of what I was talking about with Mitch, right? When you've been around entrepreneurs for so many years, it's more than half my life, you start realizing there are common things that they get around. And of course, we've spent our lifetime becoming experts in the persuasion aspect, right? So for us, that's a key thing. But I still think it always comes down to that, right? That's the first place. If you're not an expert about your customers, that's the number one biggest blind spot, period. Okay. Some people become what I call bubblegum marketers. They just accidentally blow up a big bubble and it looks great. But at some point it's so thin that it just evaporates. Right. And we've seen those. We've seen those businesses, basically blow apart because they started neglecting their customers. Sears was a great example of this, right? They forgot who the customer was, right? They got so focused in on their products and their business they thought the customer wasn't changing. And so you constantly need to be ahead of that and understanding, customer expectations. And I'll give you a simple story with that. We were working with a retailer who sold very high-end watches in the Bay Area. And my brother was there for a meeting with the owner of the company and his marketing team. At some point, he started asking them about their leads and how long it takes for them to respond to the leads that come in, right? To see these watches. And I think the sales guy goes, yeah, we try to get back to everybody within like 24 to 48 hours or something like that. My brother just pockets that in the back of his head, doesn't think anything about it. About an hour later, they get a knock at the door, and he ordered a whole bunch of things on Amazon Prime to be delivered. He starts pulling them out of the bag, and they're looking at him. It's like, well, just imagine, all of your customers could go on Amazon and they can order all this stuff, and it got here in less than 30 minutes. What do you think their expectations are to get a phone call returned if they can order all this stuff and get it immediately? And you could just see the CEO look like he just never thought about it from his customer's point of view. And as soon as we show them their light, that's their expectation. And in business, that's everybody's expectation today, because we've gotten that feeling. Oh, I need a car? Great. I'm just going to get an Uber. I'm going to find a car right away. Everything's at the push of a button. So we need to understand that we compete with that every single day. And so those kinds of stories, I think, are very important for people to understand. If you start from that point of view of the customer and where their expectations and needs are, the rest will sort of fall in place. Obviously, you can surround yourself with the experts for the other categories, but nothing beats understanding your customers.
If you're sort of like a small startup and you're sort of teetering, sort of break even, would it be smarter to invest time and money into building out a better sort of customer service team, have it 24/7, have rotating sort of customer service people, and sort of do something that's a longer term investment? You're not going to see money come in straight away from that move versus trying to launch a new campaign or focus on marketing and put money and time towards that.
It just really depends. I mean, it depends on the industry, the complexity of your product, what size of audience you currently have, how complex of a sale it is. Are we selling, a silicone hand glove like for the oven mitts, or are we selling, $60,000 watches? Like it really depends. There's no one easy answer for that.
Why is that? Like, if you're selling an oven mitt, is it more important to focus on customer service, or if you're selling a $60,000 watch, what's the difference in those two examples?
It's just customer expectations, right? If I'm selling a $15 silicone oven mitt, or my brother and I was just talking to him on when I was walking my dog this evening, and he bought over Black Friday this two-sided spatula that the chef was raving about, and it was on sale for like $8, right? And he says now it was like $12, and so he ordered one for me. He said I should have ordered two. I didn't even think about it. He was ordering me one, and it's because people are just so passionate about the product. But there, you just got to make sure, hey, do I have enough cash for delivering products? Can I keep getting in the hands of other influencers like that who are just passionate about the product, who share it, who I'm going to keep making sales, and I just have to make sure I can deliver to them. Whereas on the watch, I need to make sure that when they reach out, they've got an expert that they can speak to that's going to make them feel the right way, because it's one very big investment. My brother's not worried if it's the wrong spatula because it was $8, right? The commitment of it isn't that big. And it's, by the way, it's not the dollar amount. It's how much of an impact it has in your life, because you can have an $8 product that's like life-changing for you, right? Like a pair of glasses, if you've never seen, like you have problems seeing, and all of a sudden now you can see color. Like, even if it's $8, that could be life-changing. So it's never the amount, it's the value. And so you have to understand where the value points in the exchange is, and invest in those to make sure you're building more perceived value than the customer is thinking they're spending.
Bryan, how have you been able to take that consumer, customer-centric approach towards your personal brand with your content, your books? How have you been able to bring that experience over for this?
So I'll take you back to a funny story. Our first bestseller. We had written the Persuasive Online Copywriting. We had written a web analytics book. It was an ebook that we were giving out called The Marketer's Common Sense Guide to E-Metrics. I co-authored with Jim Novo. And one of the early analytics companies was paying us to print those out and give them out at their roadshow. And we told them we were going to be coming out with another book. It's called Call to Action at the time. It's the first book on conversion ever written at the time, and it was a nice thick book. And they had committed to buying a few thousand to give away at their roadshow. Before we were supposed to release it, about a month beforehand, they told us, we're going to start the roadshow 3 weeks earlier. Could you finish the book 3 weeks earlier? That basically meant we had the rest of the week and the weekend to finish writing and editing the book. And we were like, yeah, sure, whatever you need. And we literally took everybody in our office. I think there was about 13, 14 of us at that point in the agency's lifetime. And all weekend long, we were editing, writing, rereading chapters, we're researching things. But the biggest problem is we didn't have a cover idea. We were struggling. This is for a book called Call to Action. And so, we were all brainstorming while we were all putting together the individual chapters and figuring out where everything was going to go. And we needed to come up with a marketing plan. We didn't have a great idea. We knew we had a whole bunch of books sold. Because of those bulk books, we knew that there was going to be a chance that we could sell a significant amount of books at that point. We had a really big email list. I think it was neighbored around 40,000 subscribers at the time. We had done a couple of things. So we decided the book, you don't make money from a book, you make money because of a book. And so the list price on the book, I think, was $21.95 or $25.95. I don't remember the exact number. But we decided that we were going to sell them direct 3-to-1 because we knew what our cost for the book was. And we'll ship them out. We'll actually order them through Amazon. And we knew the numbers. We'd make it back based on what it cost us to print and what we get back. And maybe we lose a little bit on each one, but it didn't matter. Because what happens if you order 3 books, what are you going to do with the other 2?
Give it away.
You're going to give them away. So we had gotten a whole bunch of pre-orders done that way. So we're in great shape, and we're working with a friend of ours who's helped over 100 people become bestsellers because he understood how all this worked. One of the books we sent out really early on when we got the initial draft was to Seth Godin. I didn't really know Seth at this point. And Seth wrote a blog post about the book. We hadn't heard about him for a while. This was in the second week of release. And he wrote a blog post called "Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover." I can actually send you a screenshot that someone took of the post because he's changed it. But he basically said something like, and I almost want to go grab the book so you can see the cover because it's not going to do it justice. Give me 1 second.
Please do that. Please do that.
Here was the cover. Okay. It's with the Egyptian eagle on there. Okay. And this is a second printing of it. It didn't have the seal on it beforehand. We didn't know what we were going to do. So we came up with this concept a little bit off of our mentor's book, The Wizard of Ad Trilogies from Roy H. Williams, called Secret Formulas to Improve Online Results. And Seth said, don't judge a book by its cover. Drop everything that you're doing and buy this book, because if I had this book before I wrote my ebook, I probably would have stolen a whole bunch of the ideas on how to improve conversion rate. And that launched us to be New York Times bestselling authors.
Wow. How many influencers or people did you guys send out the books to?
Well, so here's another little secret of the book. I'm actually helping another friend with a book. She just tweeted about it today. So inside the book, this is one of our early ones. There were all of these little conversion tips. So separate from the rest of the book, you can kind of see there's a little gray areas. And this one was Lauren Friedman from the E-Tailing Group, But there was a bunch of others that were, talking about retail and a little bit about conversion stuff back then. And we invited probably 10 or 12 people to contribute to the book. So of course, now they had a vested interest to share. And then we sent it to a few people like Seth Godin and a handful of others. It wasn't a ton more, but we also knew, obviously, we had, this analytics company was giving out a bunch of books and they were going to be doing it early, right? And then we had all these pre-orders, and all of that was enough to drive the word of mouth to become a New York Times bestselling author. And then from there, we got and we were lucky because the publisher who printed it for us was able to reprint three reprints in like 3 weeks just to keep up with the demand. He sadly, he passed away, but he made such a difference in our career that eventually got us to a major publisher who took on our next book, which is the Waiting for Your Cat to Bark. And that was also, again, right, how do we address our audience first? That was the first book where a traditional publisher allowed us to put the PDF version of the book on a CD inside the book.
Wow.
So we've always tried to do things just to push the limits and do things in benefit of the customer. So 3 for 1, packet full of a lot of great relevant information. The guy who started bodybuilding.com told me how much he studied this book, and it basically that's what got him so successful. We've heard so many stories about that book that and that led to the next one. So yeah, you just never know. It's just if you keep focusing on just building value to your audience, what it'll eventually bring you and where you eventually will go, because it's enabled me to travel the world.
And Bryan, what have you found led to the biggest impact on your personal brand? Has it been all the books, or has it been all the content you've been producing for all these online social media platforms?
It's a good question, because the last couple of years with COVID were really difficult years. We kind of tried figuring out what we wanted to do next. From a business perspective, obviously I didn't want to travel a lot. I was very happy to be home. Still kind of happy to be home, obviously, now that I'll have 2 of my 3 kids off next year. So maybe I'll start traveling a little bit more again next year. It'll be a better time. But I think it's the combination. You've got to touch people in real places. One of my biggest things and my biggest rules about social media is I try to meet as many people in person as I possibly can. When I meet people that I really enjoy, I work my hardest to, if they're in a city near me that I can reach them, or if we're going to be in a city where, where we can meet up, I'm going to do that. And I think developing all those relationships for all those years, that really mattered. And obviously, being able to speak at conferences globally, and touching people all over the world, same thing, right? I tell my kids, I can throw a dart around the globe and I can probably find somebody, within, a few hundred miles that, I've met, trained, spoken to, had a meal with. That's the beauty of a career invested in this. The problem is too many people think that this is a 1, 2, 3 year journey. This has been a 25 plus year journey at this point.
What do you think has been the goal with the personal brand, the giving back, the content to help other entrepreneurs, when you could have just kept building more companies, go on to the next one, maybe focus on one, have an exit, go public? What made you really go hard and decide that you wanted to sort of create books and create content?
So my mentor's wife, so Roy Williams' wife, Penny Williams, who in our first book, we had my favorite Easter egg of all time with the book. We wrote in that book as the introduction, anything worth doing is worth doing wrong, to Roy and Penny, and we misspelt her name purposely, but had it correct in the acknowledgments. Okay, not a lot of people knew that, but it was a little bit of an Easter egg, and it was the point, right? But she always likes to say that when you're trying to define success, there are 3 things that you can focus on. You can focus in on the money, right? And you tend to end up, in my opinion, looking at the world transactionally. Okay, everybody has dollar signs on their foreheads. That's the old sales metaphor. I find that a little bit shallow. Former social worker here, teacher, a little hard to do. You can make a name for yourself, right? And that's really about your ego. You need people to know your name, or you can make a difference. And I think, my brother and I have always set out that if we go ahead and we make a difference. And if we just focus in on doing that for as many years as we can, we'll make a name and we'll make money. And enough money is enough. We don't need excesses. It's not what we've been about. And so, the last few years, it's been great to see some of my friends' businesses, people I've been mentoring just explode. And to me, that's great because, they're at a different point of their life and they're putting in the energy that they need to do that. And, if I can guide them on that path and make sure they turn right when, they thought of turning left, that's plenty of joy. And I think if more people optimize life towards joy, we'd have a better world.
That's beautiful. Talking about content, and I think you brought it up earlier. You mentioned MrBeast. You had a story about MrBeast. I'm a big fan of MrBeast.
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about a young woman and her dad who owns a fried chicken location. He's been all depressed because the business hasn't been going as well as he wants. And I have the main character in the book introduce her like she's like almost like she's a MrBeast story because she has a big YouTube following. Okay. This is not really her dad, but her dad is another friend of mine who has this business and takes that same concept of using a ghost kitchen and it makes him successful, right? Because the truth is, this guy has a special technique on how he does his fried chicken. He wouldn't tell me all the details, but it's basically he's doing some like he's marinating them under pressure. Okay, so the flavor gets in a very different way than anyone else. And I was like, well, and I told him, I said, what if you just franchise that? And he was thinking the old model of franchising. I said, well, now in ghost kitchens, if you can actually take that concept and let others do it, you can still make a small piece of it, right? And so I used that same principle, right? Which is the same story that MrBeast did with his burgers. And like, it would have been nice if I just told MrBeast's story, but I think that, when I'm trying to tell a fictional story, I don't want to get you confused with the actual characters. There are a couple of real characters who showed up, like my friend Peter Shankman, who's one of my favorite entrepreneur stories of all time. And I put him in a humorous situation with the young gentleman who's being mentored in the book. My friend Amanda Russell, who is now a teacher at UT, who's had 2 widely successful exits in the online fitness space. Just her full story is told in the book as well. But it all makes sense within the context of the story.
And then Bryan, you're talking about how when you make a book, you don't make money from selling the book, you make money from the result of the book. Can you explain more about that?
Well, it's similar to what I'm talking about with my friend who's putting together this book. This is another person who focuses in on mobility, right? Training people to move better. And she does an online class, and it became very big during COVID when all the professional athletes were sent back to their homes and they needed to work out. They didn't know what to do. And so she was running this class. And I explained to her, I said, all the investment you're doing in putting together the book, if all you do is sign 2 clients, you don't care if you gave away the book. Because what happened was we were very, very fortunate very early on before our first book was ever published. So my friend Larry Chase, we were in a party in his house. He used to live right on top of the Brooklyn Bridge in Manhattan. And we're finishing the party, getting ready to leave. And Larry comes over to us and said, hold on, before you leave, let me hand you my $35 business card. And he gives us a copy of his book. And he explained to him, said that, this is what it cost me to get the books from my publisher. And this is why our first book was self-published. Okay, Persuasive Online Copywriting. Because we looked at it and being like, oh, well, if it's our business card, I know I can afford to spend this to give out so many copies of our book. But if they actually read it, they're going to be impacted by the knowledge and hire us. And so the same thing, right? One person hires us, if we give out 1,000 books, one person hires, we more than made the money back, right? One speaking gig from the book, one invitation to speak in Australia about the rice and beans millionaire might pay for all the efforts of writing the book.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Why, like something about books, or everyone comes back to writing a book. Like even though we have new mediums such as creating a YouTube video, creating a movie, creating a documentary, everyone seems to always come back to writing a book, even though we've been through so many new trends and new mediums of distributing content, but everyone comes back to books.
There's something, and I've written digital books and I've written, physical books, but there's something about holding and staring at pieces of trees in your hand. It's just different as of an experience. It just feels more concrete. It feels more credible for people than just digital content, because digital content can be deleted. When I physically hold it, it lives, right? It breathes. It has its own essence. And, your favorite books have dog ears and have marks in them. It becomes yours. And so there's a different level of ownership than with digital content. And, we live in a world today with TikTok and all that, where all content is fleeting. It's a remnant, right? It's rented for a moment. So when you can give something really relevant to people that they enjoy reading, because everyone will say, well, nobody reads anymore. No, but what about the Harry Potter books? Right? What about the 50 Shades of Grey? People read. Just got to be the right subject matter. It's got to be the right pieces of attention. There's not a lot of great content out there. And so you have to know how to balance being able to give them value for their time, because it's not the content, it's the time they take to read it. That's the hardest thing to do.
Now, do books have like a half-life where you put in all this effort to have that initial launch and it just sort of dwindles off? And then by then, do you just use it as like a business card and just give it away, and that's sort of your way to get it out there?
Depends on the style of book. Some books are evergreen. If you think about, like some of Seth Godin's books, like The Purple Cow, that one probably is an evergreen book. You think about Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. That's an evergreen book. Books about the early internet, I got a bunch of them here sitting on the shelves that I won't get rid of because they're, signed copies from friends. My friend Avinash Kaushik's books on web analytics. It's old, it's outdated already at this point, but it's still his book. I'm not going to get rid of it. But it's dated, like it is, right? And that's okay.
And Bryan, I guess right now, over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think your focus is? Is it the content? Is it the books, trying to make change? Is it this new software company that you're sort of building out to help homeware companies? Is it the consulting side of things, speaking, everything?
It's probably a little bit of everything. I think in the next 5 years, I'll probably definitely come back to speak again. Hopefully the airlines will figure out that customers matter again. It's been pretty brutal out there the last couple of years. I definitely, we'll keep working on the software side. A big focus that COVID gave me is, family time is really important. And the value and freedom that I had to be able to be around my kids, that I could spend more energy focused in on the years when I have them. Because like I said, my daughter will be out my door and living in a different city than in 6 months. My son will be away at college for the next 4 years, and then maybe, who knows, he'll go pro. So he'll be out of the nest. And then I only have one left. And it's like, well, it's much easier to give one a lot of attention than three who are all around. But the one being there, but also give me time to invest on traveling more and hopefully speaking some more. I would definitely enjoy doing some more of that. I always have a passion for teaching.
I do feel like there's this shift where I'm just meeting a lot of older entrepreneurs where they are advocating, and I'm just seeing from their content, there's this shift towards family. They're spending time with your kids, because I feel like the previous generation, you'd go into tech, you would have a business, you would have kids, but you would just focus on your main business, and your kids would just grow up and they would end up well because you could afford a really good upbringing. But there seems to be a shift recently where I'm just seeing from the content and all these dads, they're just talking about spending more time with their kids.
Yeah, I think it's a shift in values. Roy Williams wrote a book with my friend Mike Drew several years ago called Pendulum. And he talks about these 20-year cycles. And I think we're in the middle of a shift in our generations about what we value. And the tribe, when we recognize that, hey, it's great to build an online tribe, but the tribe in my house really is the most important first. And, I think we need to make sure that, they're settled and looking around the world and, we are living in a time of a lot of chaos. It's disruptive everywhere, unfortunately. I don't know a nation that's not going through some kind of turmoil, and this is all expected. This is the exact same thing that we were seeing 40 years ago. Okay, we can see the pendulum. It's just there. We're going to start shifting back because there are different sets of value that drive us in this pendulum. And I don't want to give out the details of the book, but you go back to biblical times, it talks about these 40-year cycles of a generation, right? And generational values shift. And so, my generation, I'm probably, good 20 plus years older than you. You've seen one side where it was all the way extreme. I've seen the other side. You haven't experienced that yet. And I sort of know we need to get back there. And there's a balance there. We'll get too hippie. Don't worry, we'll get there. But for now, we've got to find a happy medium. We've got to swing back towards the middle, so we can be more inclusive to our society and have more success for everybody, right? I think that's the big one. I think we're seeing this horrible situation with oligarchs across the world where there is too much wealth in certain people's hands. I know what it was like for my parents to buy a house, and it wasn't a stretch, it was work, right? They both worked. Right now, like, I look at my kids and I'm looking at, like my daughter, and I'm thinking like, wow, to even have anything similar to my house, I can't imagine what she's going to have to go through in her career in order to be able to afford houses. It's just mind blowing. And to me, that's frightening because that's not setting her up on a journey of success at all, right? So yeah, she's going to have to figure out a side hustle. Hopefully she'll read the book. My two boys have, she hasn't, but she's going to have to figure that out. And like, it's an unfortunate situation because you really don't need a lot. And I think this is one of the first things when people start understanding, like, and I talk about it very early on in the book, is like, you need to learn to live not like a millionaire. One of my favorite books was and influences was The Millionaire Next Door. And it talked about how, there's so many millionaires out there, you don't even know who they are because they're just living in a common house with a very simple, very simple cars. They're not driving anything fancy, but they've got all that cash, saved and invested and stuff like that. And it's like, that matters more. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, right? How much you could bring towards your lifestyle. And so when you don't bring your lifestyle too extreme, you can enjoy a lot in life.
Last thing I want to get your thoughts on and advice on, Bryan, is how do you find like consistency within inconsistency? So let's say, I have my e-commerce stores, I have my drop shipping stores, I have the coaching and teaching people how to do that. Then I have the YouTube content, the TikTok, the Instagram. Then I'm sort of building an education platform. So I have all these different things, just like how you have a bunch of different things from your software to speaking. How do you, like, I'm finding that, like, I used to be really focused on doing one thing, but I've sort of really spread out over the last 2-3 years after COVID. But how do you find consistency within inconsistency?
So first, you have to have your personal routines in place. That's the first thing. So, every morning, I have my green smoothie. There's certain things I have to do every morning. I get out for my walk because if you're not balanced within yourself, you can't find balance in your life. And I don't think, because of all the technology, we don't spend enough time in our own world, okay? We spend all our time in the external world being influenced by others. So take that time, and I developed it when the kids were very, very young. I would wake up super early because it was the only quiet time in the house. But that became my time, right? I'd wake up, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd make my shake, and I'd go for my walk, and I'd work out. That was critical because that let me go for the rest of the day because I already started off as a success. When you let everything else be important rather than, like have to do, everything will tug at you. But you need to find a way to set your priorities. And like I said, it starts with finding your balance.
That's a very good tip, because that's something that can be consistent. Like that's something you can control, and getting all the things that you can control consistent, that's the best you can do, and everything else sort of falls into place.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Bryan. I really appreciate talking to you. I just love just hearing your story, and just I can definitely feel the wealth of knowledge you've accumulated over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
I appreciate it, and I'll send you an early copy of the book. It'll come out December 14th. What I'm planning to do for this one, and every one I've launched differently, is very early in the first few days, I'm going to make the Kindle for free. I'm not going to start marketing the book until the new year, right? It just doesn't make sense, but I'm going to let people download it for free or buy the paperback pretty much at cost, just to get my friends and families to be able to get copies of it. And then this is a book that will last for years. There's no story there, and there's no, one marketing tip that you got to take advantage of now. This is a book that, you'll be giving to people for their graduations, people who are dissatisfied with their job. So I'm not worried about, I'm going to lose some money if I don't charge a premium day one. After January, I'll raise the price a little bit, but at least this way there'll be enough people who bought the book, reviewed the book, and it'll be out there.
Makes sense. Bryan, where can people find more about what you do, hear your thoughts, and follow you along on your journey?
It's not hard. Just Google me, Bryan Eisenberg, and you'll find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I haven't been posting as much content. Again, just been kind of focused heads down, just getting all the stuff kind of ready again. But I'm getting ready to get back out there. You'll start seeing some more stuff soon.
Thank you so much, Bryan. I really appreciate your time today. I can definitely feel like just the realness and the authenticity from you, and you being open, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the curiosity factor that you have, because if there's one characteristic that we've always hired on and that we've always found in terms of being the people we enjoyed hanging around with, is curiosity, because that always makes you interesting.
Thank you so much. If you guys made it this far into the podcast, I want to thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate you guys listening. Please let me know your thoughts. I've been reading all the Apple and Spotify reviews, so please drop a review so I know what I can improve on and what I can work on, or just let me know that you guys appreciate and like it. So thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I'll see you guys next week with another episode. Peace.